Well, hello, class of 2005 Memorial University. It's great to have this chat with you. This is a kind of medium that is getting more and more steam across the country as many medical schools have more and more training in rural medicine that puts people off-site. And so you may as well get used to it. Memorial was a bit of a trailblazer for audio teleconference and video teleconferencing, but now the rest of the country has completely caught up. And in the last 6 months, I've been involved with about 6 video conferences. In the 6 months prior to that, 1. And so it just really seems to be steamrolling now. So, anyways, without further ado, we're here today to talk about interviewing for residency. You know, that very small thing that's coming up in January. And, you know, a very small little hurdle on the way to becoming the specialist of your choice. And we're here today to talk about some of the do's and don'ts of interviewing, some ways to help make sure that you reach your goals. And even just in these first few seconds, I've made a couple of subtle errors. In the past, when I've done this talk, I've made some pretty big errors, but I've already made some subtle ones, because I think the big ones are pretty obvious. But can anybody figure out, say that in the row number 2, the lady in the mauve sweater, can you name an error? That's you.
Not maintaining eye contact early on?
Absolutely. And you know what? That's actually the most important one. Everything else, you know, I had my hand in front of my mouth a couple of times. I tried to be a bit too dynamic there for a little bit. And on video conferencing, I think I'm a big head right in front of you. And it's not good to, if you know you're taking up a lot of physical space, to throw in a lot of, you know, major hand gestures. Same as if you're in a very small room. Now, if it turns out you're interviewing in front of 10 people in a large room, well, then being a bit more visible is not such a bad thing. But the most important thing, crucially, it has been the eye contact. I would suggest, and I think most people know this, that when you're in the room interviewing the people, you really want to make sure that you make eye contact with everybody, maintain eye contact when you're asked a question, and, you know, and just continue with it. Sure, you can look away from time to time, but it shouldn't be a terrible amount. Now, you know, sometimes people lose eye contact because of nerves or whatever, but it's really important to try to make sure that that is probably your number one strategy for success. To have somebody remember who you are, what you look like, trying to piece those things together, is maintaining your eye contact. Now, so first of all, we're all adult learners here. So I want to hear some goals of why, I wanted to review the objectives for today's interaction. Number 1, I think we should discuss goals of interviewing. Number 2, how you can fulfill your goals. Number 3, some key tips on goals. And number 4, how to handle tough questions. So, does anybody object to those things being discussed? Okay, that's some good head shaking there. Okay, so number 1, can somebody give me a good goal for going to these interviews? Why are you going?
To get a residency spot.
To get a residency spot, okay. And how are you going to convince them that that residency spot should be yours?
Convince them you fit in with their program. You're a good fit.
A good fit. And that's absolutely crucial. Some residencies, you know, really are striving for a good fit. You'll hear from program directors, particularly 5-year programs, that they want to have a good fit with the person. It's not so much whether you can quote the recent literature in their field, but they want to make sure that you will be a good fit with their team. And so that, because they've got to spend 5 years with you, they have to rely on you and trust you to be part of the team and be able to get along well with you, because they've got 5 years with them and you've got they have 5 years with you and you have 5 years with them. So absolutely, you want to try to convince them that you're a good fit, and we'll get to that. Any other reasons for, any other sort of goals of the interview? A good fit.
You want to kind of like strengthen your application by verbalizing like who you are and what you can bring to the program.
Absolutely. Let them know the true you. And we'll get to that in detail, but I would definitely agree. In fact, I would suggest that's even the most important thing, because if they learn the true you, then that will probably describe whether you're going to be a good fit for them. All right. Any other reasons to go to the interview?
If you haven't been on an elective at the school, you want to find out a little bit about the program.
Yep, I think that's great. But I think that in that little phrase, who said that point? Raise your hand. Okay. Oh, I just saw your arm. Okay. All right, gray arm guy. I think that was a great idea. But there's one small problem I would suggest when you're going to interviews. Yes, you want to go learn about them. But I would suggest, and we'll come to this, that you should already know about them before you arrive. And that's a key element. That's the key inside tip on how to make yourself stand out versus somebody else. Okay. Wow, well, that was pretty easy. Those were the 3 things that I had listed, and you guys nailed them right away. So we can either sign off now and go to Tim's, or we can sort of chat about a few more things. All right. So, in terms of letting them know the true you, one of the key things is to be present in the room, to actually be there so that you can make the connection. You know, so here we are doing this by video conference. Now, do you think this is a good medium for an interview or a bad medium?
Bad?
Yeah. I think it's bad. Back about 8 years ago, there was a big effort to include video conferencing as an option for medical students. And it was partly because of convenience, partly because of monetary issues. But you know what? Having been involved with enough video conferences now, I think it's bad because it's unreliable. It can be quite inconvenient for the person who's interviewing you, because they might have to go to a completely different site today. And I'm not complaining. The only available site, easily available site in London, was in this 1970s built structure that I'd never been in, which has these crazy corridors, like absolutely crazy. So finding my place, you know, I arrived a little bit sort of, you know, trying to get a bit settled. You know, I wasn't in the mood to kind of happily engage a prospective resident. And more so, and we'll only talk about video conferencing for a couple of minutes, I think more so it makes you look like a moron sometimes. And this may seem a bit funny, but in preparation for today, I reviewed last year's tape. And because I was going to review it just to make sure that we covered some of the same issues. I was going to review it as a mature process to refine this presentation over time. And as I watched the video, the only thing I could think of was, holy God, I look like an absolute moron. And it's true, though. My hair, which is normally in a rather jaunty, stylish, unkept state, just looked like some crazy animal. And the other thing is you have this time delay. So I say a joke and wait. And it's certainly not ideal. Other things are that there's weird visual things. Like, have any of you noticed that I kind of blend into my background a little? I did that on purpose, so now I will throw on the jacket. And suddenly you'll notice that suddenly I'm standing out way more on the screen. Maybe actually a little too much, you might even think. Once again, video conferencing might be an option. I think we should spend at the maximum 1 more minute talking about it. But if you do, there's a bunch of things. Make sure you prepare the room. You'll have noticed there's no chairs behind me. There's all this distracting stuff behind me. I got rid of that. I tried to show up early, and good thing I did. You have to sort of stay very still. Make sure you look at the camera. And it's very hard to look at the camera. I keep trying to look at each of you individually in the TV screen, the way I would normally talk to a room. And maybe you're noticing that my eyes are a little downcast. And it's hard to keep looking at the camera. Ensure that you as the individual can be seen, that you're not like over here. That's not very good. Do not hold objects when you're doing it because it's very distracting. And in fact, holding a pen even in the room is a very distracting thing. Always put them down. Always put them down. You try to dress a little bit conservatively. Never dress red on a video conferencing. It glows like a lightsaber. If you're bald or have a bit of a bald area, you can get a shiny bit, like up there. Glasses. I had very narrow wireframe glasses on last year, but on the screen they came out looking like, you know, circa 1962 Nana Muscori glasses. And the time delay is an annoyance. and make sure you don't blend with the wall. And also make sure you have no red and no stripes and no bold colors. Okay, so that's it for video conferencing. Is anybody going to do a video conferencing interview? No? Good. Moving on. Okay, so when you're trying to be in the room, the key thing is you want to really be in the room. You want these residency interviewers. These are busy people. These are women and men who have a busy clinical life and busy research or academic life already, and suddenly now in January, they've suddenly got to accommodate not just your interview, but maybe 15, maybe 20 interviews. And that's a bit of a phenomenal sacrifice, and you want to make sure that at the least they leave the room thinking that you were respectful of their time and that you weren't just blowing them off as a second or 20th option. And it's important to just project that and make sure that you get enough rest beforehand, that that you actually have a good night's sleep so that you're not tired and so that you can actively engage them. And number two, that you maintain the eye contact. And I would say those are the two key strategies. A second large thing, so not only are you being present in the room, but number two, you're going to try to be clear. So when you're talking about things, number them, as I have just done for anybody who is paying attention. So number one, be present. Number two, be clear. And number three, be professional. And so, because by numbering things, you sort of crystallize ideas a little bit. It's easier for somebody to follow your logic if you say, well, there's three answers to your question. And then you go through number one, number two, and they know where you're going. It's a very comfortable kind of interview, rather than giving an answer and they don't really know where you're going with it. So you try to be clear. Pause when it's required, just like I just did. Okay, and because it's quite surprising how many people go into their interview and go mad with all sorts of ideas, and they say, well, I'm the best person, or I think I would be an excellent candidate because I have a very high research interest, I have a lot of educational experience, I am very good on the floors clinically, and I interact well within a large team, and I am very good with patients, and I've received excellent feedback in the Dean's Award. That's not a good way to do it, because you don't give them a chance to easily listen. You'll let them tune out pretty quickly. And I think we all kind of know these things intuitively, but you just want to refresh that. And then the last key component of your goal of letting them know the true you is to be professional, to be mature, professional, respectful, and honest. And those things are really important, of course. What's the number one thing do you think people hate, program directors hate, through the interviewing process? One feature they hate about a medical student. Who do you think they hate more? Somebody who smells or somebody who lies? Lies. There's absolutely no doubt. Program directors, even when they put that person in an awkward spot where they probably lied as an easy way out, program directors, good or bad, hate liars. And that's crucial, and we'll get to that when we talk about tough questions. But in all things, be honest. Don't overblow. If you opened the cheese tray, don't say you ran the wine and cheeses for a 4-year period. And those simple things can lead to problems. If people get a sense that you're lying and then they ask you follow-up questions and then you get a bit fudgy, that's the worst case scenario. And it can follow you because Canada is a small town when it comes to medicine. People do talk to each other. Program directors will talk, not necessarily during CARM's time, but afterwards. And they'll say, did you get that crazy person who said that they were the dean of the medical school and had saved the world? And they do talk. And then other thing, you don't want to run into them when you're doing your examination 2 or 5 years later, and then you realize, uh-oh, that's not good either. Okay. Now, so your goals are letting them get to know the true you, getting a real chance to describe your successes and strengths, and getting to learn about them. Yeah, I would totally agree that those are good goals of your interview. And when you try to let them know the true you, truly answer their questions. And don't just give short answers. That's an error sometimes people make. And when they say, tell us about your research, well, tell them about your research. Tell them about your role And also, the key, you want to try to really suggest why you're a good person. So don't just tell them, well, I worked in this lab that helped cure cancer. No, you say, I worked in this lab that helped cure cancer, and my specific role was piecing together different literature reviews and detecting common themes to do that. And just make it a little bit, flesh things out a little bit more. Because that will, number one, show that you have a bit of an in-depth understanding of your role. And number two, if you can actually present challenges that you faced and how you overcame them, then you've sort of thrown in an extra kind of question, and you're trying to show how you're a good problem solver or a good motivator. Let me see. Learning about them is key. Ask about them, because you want to know, is this a place where you want to be? There's absolutely no doubt. But you also want to, you want to know how is their clinical life, but also what are the other things in the community, and what about the research and academic life? And you want to get the answers to these questions. And programs are usually, I think, quite straightforward on what their strengths and maybe what their weaknesses are, but you can certainly get their strengths from them. They'll usually, be proclaiming those. Okay, now, how to get to your goals of getting these three things covered, letting them know you, your strengths and successes, and learning about them. You want to limit distractions. So, arms crossed is bad. We all know this limits the ability of people to interact. It's a physical barrier. Pen fiddling is bad. Poor eye contact is bad. Watch checking, a large number of people do that. And it looks like you have somewhere else to go. Oh, Spider-Man 2 at the IMAX is holding us up, is it? Oh, sorry about that. And program directors don't warm to watch checking, I would suggest. In speech, I have a bit of a problem with the word and sometimes the phrase And if you sense yourself saying either of them, a good little tip that Toastmasters suggests is that instead of saying you pause, just like them. And then at the least, okay, you've got a little tiny pause, which sounds rather intelligent, like you've planned it that way, when in fact you're really just desperately happy you covered up an And it actually works. It works quite well. You can't overuse it, I suppose, but it does work. Number two, speaking with too low a volume can be an issue. If you're speaking too quietly, it's a real problem. So, if you speak too quietly, it can be obviously a huge problem. But people do that. Also, speaking too loud is an issue because, people are in the one room and you have to sort of get a gauge of where you are. I tend to err on the loud side, but I won't go into various stories about that, but let's just rest it at that. You want to make sure that you do fill the corners. And if you kind of keep that in your mind, filling the corners, usually you project your voice to the appropriate level. Speaking with your hand over your mouth, once again, a surprising number of people do that. And playing with whatever furry bits they're growing on their face at the time. People do that a lot too. Speaking too fast is an issue. And in fact, I would suggest, as Newfoundlanders or even non-Newfoundlanders who have been living in Newfoundland for 3.5 years now, I think you're at risk of speaking too fast. Even to this day. Well, to this day, I'm in Ontario now 3 years. And to this day, I still have to consciously slow down my speech. And that may seem strange, but it's true. Inherently, Newfoundlanders speak fast, and I really have to work to maintain the speed of my speech a bit low. Your attire. A lot of people ask questions about this. And by the way, I don't just do these talks for Memorial, but last year, I've even been giving this talk at Ottawa. And certainly a lot of people ask what to wear. And the key thing is you want to minimize distractions so that nothing is getting in the way of your main goals. So, if you really have a sense that a particular program is a bit more casual, then okay, you can be a bit more casual, but don't be so casual that it, grabs attention, unless that's your strategy, which I wouldn't suggest is the greatest strategy. But you want to really aim towards the most conservative denominator, typically. So men should be wearing jackets or suits. Women should probably be wearing suits. Now, whether you want to wear slacks or skirt depends on the woman. A blouse and skirt and a shirt and tie alone are probably a little bit on the casual side. Not definitely, but I mean, and I think we all know how to sort of figure it out. If you don't know, if you're just completely clueless, like that guy there in the second row leaning over on his right fist, who has no sense of fashion style. I'm just kidding. But if you are completely clueless, then ask for help. And guys, ask women. That's a good little tip there. And because some of the tips you can get from guys might be the wrong tips, Now, novelty ties. Obviously, they're sort of passé, but there still are novelty ties out there. Maybe, and I'm talking maybe in pediatrics, should you wear one? But I still think, you know what? There are some people in pediatrics who find that pediatrics has gotten too cutesified. So you don't want to show up with a novelty tie and some sort of puffy clown head thing, and you walk in and the person's wearing a nice Armani suit. You sort of will get the sense that you've missed something there. Let me see. Of course, you want to wear decent shoes. Try not to have the most scuffed up pair like I'm wearing right now. My favorite pair of Doc Martens that I've had from 1994. You should probably have a decent pair of shoes on, of course. And there's small things. And once again, these are little small tips, but they are relevant. Sorry for checking my watch, by the way. I'm not disinterested. I just want to be sure we get it through things. Small things, like make sure your buttons are buttoned if you have a button-down collar. Facial jewelry. Is anybody intending to wear facial jewelry to their interview? Good. That's a good thing. Other types of jewelry that's hidden, that's up to you, and that's too much information for today. Okay, that was supposed to be a joke. Okay, so key tips. And number one key tip, how to get into a residency program? Research that site. If you want to get into urology at the University of Toronto, obstetrics at the University of Saskatchewan, or family medicine at the Royal Stream at the University of Ottawa, it doesn't matter. Research the site, find out the program director's name and the chair of the department's name, and do a literature search on them. Now anybody who was here last year, I guess it's probably just June, will see that this is a huge difference. I've really jacked up the importance of this. And you know what? I think this is crucially important. I'm becoming more aware that there are so many medical students now at the mainline medical schools that the schools and the programs are finding that they're just getting overwhelmed with all these learners, that people who are from very disparate sites are a little bit harder to get noticed. And I would suggest the way you do it is you beat them at their own game, know their research. And you know what? If that takes a half an hour to at least understand what the program directors and other people at the department, what their key research interests are, do it. I mean, the answer comes down to, do you want to get into that program or not? If the answer is yes, do this. I would highly recommend it. I can't recommend it strong enough. And importantly, and as important, make sure you have not just one, but potentially 2 or 3 questions prepared for each interview. Once again, this is maybe a bit of a stronger recommendation than I've given before, but the problem is the bar is going up. That with more and more medical students across the country that are known and are overwhelming the mainline sites, if you're interviewing outside of Newfoundland, as I'm sure most of you are, at least for your backups, then you want to be not just lost in the shuffle. What does having questions mean? So, 2 rows behind the fellow without fashion sense, there's a woman with a dark sweater and I think a gray top, and she has long hair. Yeah, your friend is looking right at you. That's you. Why would you bother to have 2 questions? Oh, can somebody repeat it? I didn't hear it.
Why would you bother to have 2 questions?
Yeah, why would you bother to have 2 questions prepared to ask your interviewers?
Number 1, it would show that I've taken time to think enough about their program to prepare 2 questions. And maybe the first question that I ask them may not go over well in the brief. They may be brief in their response, so I would have a second one as a backup that they may feel would be more appropriate for them to respond to. So I guess for reason number 1 to show them that I've taken the time to consider things and come up with 2 questions. And the second thing would be, if the first question didn't go over well, then maybe the second question would engage them more and
Good. I think that's great. And do any of you know, second to liars, and maybe people who smell, what's the next thing that, what is the next thing that program directors hate?
people that don't talk enough.
People that what?
People that don't talk enough or ask questions or show interest.
Sure, people, well, and it really comes down to the people who don't show interest. It's because the program directors suspect, and maybe they're right, and maybe they're wrong, that you're only applying to them as a backup. No program wants to be seen and feel that they're only a backup. Now, there's nothing wrong with being somebody's second choice, I think. I think if you get your top applicant, but because they didn't get into their favorite program, they got into yours, they're still your top applicant. But people are not secure in their, they're not secure like I am. They're nervous, you know, they're worried, they're insecure, and particularly the insecure programs and insecure disciplines can really often feel that people are only applying to them as a backup plan. Now, maybe you are, but there's nothing wrong with that. You know, you're allowed to earnestly apply to as many programs as you wish. That's okay. But make sure that it's earnestly, that you, even for your backups, apply to them as if this was the only program you're applying to. And I think if you maintain that sort of focus, it will come through in your interviews. And that's really important. You do not want to give them the impression that you're there just for the backup. Now, it may become apparent that all of your electives are in surgery and you've applied to family medicine. And you can say, well, you know what? I have a, you know, when they ask you, well, it looks like you're applying to us as only a backup option. And you say, well, what this shows is that I am interested in family medicine. That's why I'm applying. I'm not sure if, though, surgery is right for me. And so that's why I did those electives, to help understand that a bit better. And at the end of the interviewing process, I will be able to sort of figure that out a bit more. Having said that, though, I think I'm an excellent candidate for you for family medicine. And this is why I think I would be a good fit. Okay. So be prepared. Another big tip. So research the site. And number 2 is be prepared. And I'm talking about really prepared. And they're not the same thing. Have extra copies of your CV available. Most times they won't want it. But sometimes they will. And if you've got in your briefcase that you bring with you, or a folder, and once again, don't have some crappy little dog-eared thing. No, have a decent-looking folder at least. And if you can haul out on beautiful paper this nicely prepared CV that you can hand to them, that they receive in their hands almost as if it's alms from the gods, then wow, that'll be an impression. Versus they've got some crappy photocopied, refotocopied version on terrible paper. But if you've got it on nice paper ready to go, most times when you ask them at the end, if they say, do you have any questions? And you have 1 or 2 about the program, and then you say, now, by the way, I brought spare copies of my CV. Did you want it? Most times they'll say no, but you'll have accomplished a very big goal. You were prepared, and you're working towards their needs. And that's it's not sucking up, it's just being prepared. And I think that does get as something for some people, And other times, sure, it might not help. But most importantly, if they want your CV, say if there's 3 interviewers and only one of them had a copy of your CV, well, that's just gold. That's a rare opportunity where you have a chance to deliver something into their hands. And that front page is really important. Now, if there's glasses of water in the room, pour it as soon as you arrive, because then it's ready to go. There's nothing worse than you're in the middle of a very complex question, and then your voice goes or whatever, and then you have to suddenly pour the water, spill the water all over them, and then it's just a big hullabaloo. And another thing is, of course, showing up early, because you never know but that the room has changed, the building takes 20 minutes to get through, there's construction, who knows? And if you're going to University of Calgary particularly, I would suggest that you really show up early because there's major construction going on right now at their medical school. Okay. Now, so before we get to tough questions, what do you think about all those sorts of things? Do you have any comments or questions? And so we're talking about the presentation and running of your interview. We'll talk to specific challenging questions interviewers might ask you in a moment. But about that whole first set of things. Any comments? Yes?
What if they ask you, have you applied to any other programs? And you're trying to convince them that this is what
Oh,
the program is.
well, that's a very easy question. Just talking to you right now, have you applied to any other programs? Well, the answer is, well, of course I've applied to other programs, because otherwise I would risk that if for whatever reason, and I can't imagine there being one, but that you wouldn't rank me, for whatever reason, that you wouldn't rank me at the top of your list, and you can grin and say, and once again, and I can't imagine you not doing that, but, and say, there's that risk that I could go unmatched. So of course I've ranked other programs. Now, are they allowed to ask that question? The answer is no. There are clear questions that are not allowed, but people still get asked anyways. Dr. Harris and myself did a study 2 years ago, and unfortunately we had a low response rate, so it wasn't very publishable. But of the 18 respondents, something like 7, I think it was, were asked clearly inappropriate questions, even things that went into human rights legislation territory. And so when that happens, it is concerning. Last year in Ottawa, the Francophone students had already had their interviews when I had my presentation with them, and of those, 4 of those were asked human rights legislation relevant questions, let alone the etiquette questions of who are you intending to rank first, to what other programs have you applied. So, how do you deal with this? I don't mind the question, have you applied to other programs? I think it's a moron who would ask that question, because everybody's encouraging their students to at least apply to more than one program. The question is that I would not want to receive is, how are you intending to rank our program, or where are you intending to rank? And that's a very difficult question. Some people might choose to give them the honest answer. Some people might choose, and I would suggest this is wrong, to give them a lie and say, oh, you're a program, of course. And that's bad, because if you don't choose them, you've got a problem, because suddenly you're now known as a liar. And I know somebody for whom this became a huge problem. What you say is that I don't want to commit to something right now, because I've got to think about our conversation we've had today. You've really illuminated a phenomenal amount of research and academic opportunities that, I'll be frank, I didn't realize existed at this site to this level. And this has really challenged me in an exciting way to have to reorient my order list in my mind. So, that says that you've had a great conversation, you'll learn information that will change your choice, and you're sort of hinting, but not saying, that, they're now the top. And, I don't think you should say more than that. Now, if they push you and really say, well, we have a policy here. We don't rank anybody who doesn't rank us number one. You know, I mean, that would be a crazy situation, but I suppose it could happen. Well, then I think you say, you know, as a mature adult learner, I want to be completely honest with you, and I think it would be very hard, and you would not expect me to today, a month ahead of the match day, to make that decision when I've yet to now, you know, research things thoroughly. I'm meeting with your residents this afternoon. I've yet a lot more to discover about your city, but you wouldn't want me to give you an answer today when, for all we know, that could change because of family reasons, personal reasons. I have no idea. None of us have any idea. But what I can say is I like your program. In fact, I want to be in your program. And that's what I can say. And more importantly, I think I would be a good fit for your program, and I would be somebody who would bring a lot to your program. And I would say that's how you deal with it. It's difficult, though. I've had a lot of practice because I've been asked this question every year now for about 6 years. And it's very hard to do. So you know what I would suggest? Is that not just today. No. I would suggest if you've got any mentors, and by now I'm sure there's different clinicians that you might have individually had a good interaction with, why don't you ask them just to meet up with you sometime and fire some very tough questions at you and practice this. And this is actually another stronger recommendation over last year, that you formally practice this. And it's not so that you get to be very slick at answering these tough questions, but it's so that you're not stumbling all around, so that you can put together some key themes and at the same time express genuine interest in their program. Okay, another tough question. Okay, you in the back, dark hair, yellowish top.
Hi, I was just wondering if you have any suggestions on some types of questions that we could ask the program.
Okay, well, here is the new trend. Well, first of all, family medicine. I would suggest the trend of family medicine is changing. The structure and nature of family medicine is in significant flux. We're seeing nurse practitioners being trained at an extraordinary rate. Excuse me. And so in family medicine, I would suggest you ask programs questions about opportunities for non-clinical activities. Specifically, you know, do you have a stream towards getting a master's of education? Or do you have a stream or structure to getting a master's of clinical science or epidemiology or, you know, something along those lines? What are your research opportunities? And the reason why I'm saying those things is that may seem a bit startling towards some of you who want to do bread and butter family medicine. But you know what? Even bread and butter family medicine, I think you should do family medicine plus, meaning do something else built in, whether it's a small project or a large project, something else that will make you clearly distinctive than, say, somebody with primary care clinical training. And so I would suggest that you find out, you know, does this family medicine program have a route that you can, in your second year, work on a master's of medical education, for instance. So those, I think, are good things within family. And in fact, those large questions are also good within specialties. This day and age, I find it fascinating here. If you want to work outside of Newfoundland or outside of a smaller province, you've really got a bit of a battle to make yourself noticed and to get the job you want. I'm amazed at how poorly, not poorly looked upon, but how disregarded non-formal training in various fields are regarded. And what I mean by that is, I know from my own experience, I had a significant amount of educational involvement, as June can attest to, and she's been only involved in a very small amount. At the same time, that has been very, you know, not regarded as being a significant thing, and by people up here as much. Now, I've worked and I've been able to develop a very big academic research program, and as a result, I'm where I wanted to be. But it has taken far longer than I ever anticipated. And I don't think that's just now the mainland. I think that's even starting to happen in Newfoundland. If you want maximum flexibility, I think you should be thinking about your discipline of clinical choice and thinking about what sort of role do you want in the future. Administration, administration, research, teaching, education. And teaching and education are different. Teaching is teaching medical students, teaching residents. Education is developing curriculum and program goals. And so in those 4 areas, do you want to do anything extra? And if you don't, that's fine. If you don't, I would suggest that you develop a unique clinical expertise. Once again, whether it's family medicine or specialty work. But if you do want to, if you can see yourself in 10 or 15 years that you want to be administrating a clinical program in cardiac catheterizations, then I think while you're in residency, you should start working on business management courses. Now, there's a lot of stuff to do in your residency, but you do have little pockets of time where you can start working on these things. And I would suggest that that's probably the most illustrative question to ask. Other questions, though, are can you describe to me a typical day of a resident? And you'll be startled that there are a few anesthesia programs in the country that regularly schedule ORs till 6 p.m. Well, I don't know about you, but those extra 2 hours per day of scheduled OR time would significantly decrease your family time and significantly decrease your study time. Now, would you learn more in those extra 2 hours a day? I guess you would. Would you learn that much more and to the point that it would exclude significant other elements of your life? I think it might. So finding out a typical resident day might be a good question to ask. So you're not saying, what are your work hours, which would suggest you're a lazy bugger. No, you're asking, can you describe for me something, and then you can see in their answer what you're looking for. So I would suggest you make up a list of what's important. And if what's important is future career paths, you ask questions around that. If what's important is time for your family, as well as your education, then you figure out questions around that. Things like, when are journal clubs held? Now, journal clubs are often held in the nighttime, but some programs have become much more family-centered, and now the journal clubs are held during the daytime hours. Now, it's only one night a month, but boy, once you have a spouse or a significant other, and I can tell you, once you have children, every night out of the house is a big deal, and you don't want to give any of those up. And particularly if it's once a month, like that's a huge thing. You add up your on-call nights, and suddenly you've got this journal club night that you have to spend 3 hours at one of your staff's houses, making small chitter chat, waiting, thinking, when are they going to start talking about this journal? So finding out about those sorts of things might be good too. Sometimes some programs offer good support for residents, such as good funding to go to conferences. I think Memorial's radiology program sends residents down to, I think it's Buffalo or New York, for a couple of months for certain focused training. Well, that's an interesting component. And particularly, like if you're doing anesthesia in a smaller area, you could say, you know, how would you reach the goals of educating residents in advanced cardiac surgery? You know, and ask that question. And then they could say, well, we specifically encourage you and will fund you to go on elective to a center that offers that. Oh, great. But whereas otherwise you might just, at first glance, discount a place because you're not going to get the full breadth of experience in anesthesia and cardiac surgery. Other good questions to ask are, ask the residents, are you happy? Nowadays, residents, it's astounding, will tell you the dirt. Residents will tell you everything. Nobody has any shame anymore. It's almost a bit gone too far the other way, that, like in my day, you never really shared any weaknesses you perceived that much. But boy, nowadays, you will get the most honest, brutal answers to the point it can actually turn people off. So just be a little bit careful. But still, you want to ask residents, are you happy? Are you treated fairly? If you have a problem, do you feel like you can actually get it resolved? And do you feel harassed and intimidated? And believe me, it still goes on. Okay, any other questions?
It seems like research is a bigger and bigger aspect of the interview that the programs look at. How do you ask a question about research when they can clearly see you have never been interested in it, you've never done any kind of research, and yet still maintain a competitive edge, I guess?
Okay, that's an excellent question. And the way around that is that it's not just research anymore. It's now what's called scholarly activities. So research is a scholarly activities. Other scholarly activities are things like, being involved in a committee for internal medicine, and being able to not just say I was on this committee, but saying I was on this committee and detailing what your responsibilities were, and maybe giving some sense of what a commitment that was. Maybe people have a lot more experience in scholarly activities, whether it's designing some sort of teaching things for the public, or for designing some sort of teaching module for junior medical students, whether it's been mentoring. All of these things are what's called scholarly activities. And the thing is, we're not very good and haven't been very good at documenting them ourselves. Most physicians are very poor at documenting all of that, or even recognizing what a really good thing is. I had this teaching method in Placentia of how patients would give feedback on how clinical clerks were doing. And I thought, of course you would. And I didn't realize I could have had this published a couple of years ago, and would have been probably the first time, or one of the first times, this was ever suggested as a teaching method. I would have been world renowned. But I had no clue this was a really innovative thing. And so what I would suggest is sit back for a moment and think, okay, what do I do related at all to the Faculty of Medicine or health that's not providing direct patient care, and that's not studying for my exams? And then start writing those things down. And then you can realize you can probably build a case for scholarly activities. And then you can say to the program director, you may notice that I have not chosen to pursue research as the core element of my scholarly activities, but you will notice that I have demonstrated a significant interest in examination structure and evaluation of peers. And in fact, I've been a peer counselor, and I've been a mentor towards junior colleagues. What are the opportunities that I might have in your program to pursue this and potentially even do research in these fields? And you can do that. Now, if you have 0, the big O, in scholarly activities, sorry, that was a lot harder to do than I ever anticipated. But if you have nothing in scholarly activities, well, then I think you've just got to really go on the old tried and true, message of you're a great clinical learner, you're a hard worker, you will bring to them, conscientious, careful care that is of an outstanding caliber. And one other thing you can do is just sort of say, this is something that I have neglected to do, or say this is something that I have not done because I've been, very careful and focusing on my clinical activities. But these are the 2 topics that I want to specifically get interested in, and try to match the things you're interested in with things that the program has been interested in. Now, to your right, there's somebody who has a question, but before that person, that lady with long dark hair, there was somebody way in the back, in the middle, had a question. That's you, yes.
I was just wondering what you'd recommend for the structure to approach the question of why do you want to pursue this specialty? I asked that for 2 reasons, and one is because you probably explained that on your personal letter, and also, for me, when I explained in my personal letter, I kind of went way back. Like, I was first interested, before medical school, and then in medical school. I'm worried about going on a tangent and repeating my personal letter.
Good question. The problem is, many people may not have read your personal letters, if you can believe it. And many people haven't read your CVs, just like when you apply to medical school. And every program is different, how they choose people. Sometimes people will show up, the interviewers, and will be given your file 5 minutes before they're supposed to start talking to you. So you could say, I would suggest that regardless of your personal letter, if somebody says, why do you want to enter this discipline of training, I think you should have a ready answer that's earnest and sincere. And that is not just one answer, but maybe several things. Say, there are 4 key reasons why I want to enter your discipline. And these are they. And then if they pause, you say, and particularly your location, your site, it's because I think you meet these criteria best, or I've researched things, and these are the 3 things that I like the most. So, but I wouldn't get into the big essay answer, because it's not, you want to make sure you answer the questions, but try to be efficient. There are times that people can spend so much time on a few questions that they don't get through their questions that they want to get through. And you don't know how many questions they have. Now, if it turns out then you have tons of time left over, and then they say, is there anything else you'd like to tell us? Well, then you say, well, you know what? I want to expand upon my interest in your discipline. And then do that. But you want to be, I would suggest, have a clear answer. You should not be surprised to get that answer. You should not stumble or waver on that question. If you do, somebody's going to say, well, why in the world is this person here? Why am I spending my time interviewing this person who doesn't even seem to have a clear answer why they want to enter this program? So the lady in the reddish sweater, dark hair, rubbing your hair.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, you were just rubbing your hair, maybe. Any other questions? Okay.
Just one quick question. You mentioned the importance of knowing some of the research topics that's going on in the discipline that you're applying to, so you're prepared at the interview. How do you work that into an interview without sounding like a huge tool?
Okay. And you know what? It's very easy. It may seem, as though this is going to be artificial and crazy. And by the way, it doesn't have to be just the research things. It can be any scholarly activities for which the center is known. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, by doing that, you'll know the themes of the department. There's probably a difference between the surgery residency here at Western and the surgery residency at Memorial in themes and priorities. And understanding the research behind them will, I think, help illuminate them. I would think, and I may be wrong, that the surgery department at Memorial is a bit more oriented towards, clinical questions that are directly relevant to patient care, maybe even potentially related to transport medicine and particular geographic problems in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. At Western, there's a bit more of a theoretical and sort of metabolic kind of underpinning to surgery and stuff, I think, in some of the research. Some of it is sort of bread and butter clinical questions, but some of it is a lot more of that kind of finickier, narrower focus theoretical stuff, trying to understand the pathways of sepsis, and so if you can kind of in 5 or 10 minutes get a sense of their research program, and there's easy ways to do it. You just call up the office and say, hi, do you have a research newsletter, or do you have a newsletter for your department that you can send out to the members of the public? Okay, can you send me one? Or is it on the web or whatever? So you get a flavor of their interest. Then, when you're talking to them, if that's a match with your interests, well, you'll be able to, in your conversation, be able to be talking about things in your interest that they can recognize, oh, wait now, it seems like this lady's interests are very similar to the focus we have in our program. So that's number one. Number two, then, is you say, when you have a question for us, say, well, actually, yes, I see that you have a very innovative robotics research program going on. I have an engineering background, and now applying to plastic surgery, I am really interested in applying my engineering knowledge with my clinical training in plastic surgery to your robotics program. And there's nothing wrong with that. But as long as the interests match, if you've got an interest in collaborative health, say somebody was a dietitian or a nurse prior to entering medicine, and they're going to a family medicine residency program that's known for interdepartmental or interprofessional collaborative health education, well, then you can say that. Say, in fact, I have a background as a different healthcare provider, and I want to enter your program, but particularly I want to bring my experience and knowledge and work with your team. How can you see that me with my knowledge and experience could become part of your research program in interprofessional health. And I think you just call a spade. I think by reading up on the program, you'll get a sense of their priorities. And by doing that, you'll kind of subconsciously mold the way you give responses. If you get a sense that this is a program that's really interested in the whole person, then you're probably going to spend a little bit more time talking about your travel medicine, interest in your mountain climbing or whatever. If you've got a sense that this place is very research-oriented, epidemiologically based, qualitative research, well, then you're going to be highlighting your interests along that way too. But specifically, I would suggest, if you've researched their program, then in some way you should make it known, if you at all can, without just jamming it in there. And there will be tons of opportunities. Because when they ask a question, say, can you tell us, they might say, you might be aware, we have a large research program in reducing intrapartum complications in Aboriginal peoples. And then you're, can you see, what other research interests do you have? And you say, in fact, thanks for this question. I was quite interested to read about the project that you presented last year or whatever, whatever. And I think you can kind of get the picture. You will have tons of opportunities to work this in. And if you've done that work, show it off. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, nobody has asked a question about, June, you have a question.
I don't have a question. I'm just looking at the time, David. I think we only have an hour. So I think we're pretty close to
Okay. The last question, the most difficult question, I would suggest, is what are your intentions to have a family? And people still get asked this. Last year, 3 people were asked this at the University of Ottawa. The year before, 2 or 3 people were asked this who responded at Memorial. So how do you answer that question? And sometimes people are asking that in a happy-go-lucky way. We are very family-oriented. Are you interested in having a family? Or sometimes people are asking it in a, we want a strict clinical worker for 5 years without any hitches kind of way. And whichever way it's being presented, it's still a wrong question. It's not allowed. It's a complete betrayal of human rights legislation. So the way you answer it is you say, I don't know how things can develop, as nobody can predict. But I can tell you, if I'm accepted into your program, I will be committed to the program, and I will be devoting my energy towards being an excellent clinical learner, to providing excellent patient care, to supporting the department in our clinical goals, and being part of our educational team. And if it happens that there's some life event, an illness, some family disaster, or something else that will temporarily suspend things for me, I can tell you that I will be working to minimize this impact, and most importantly, you won't mind because you'll realize that I'm such an asset to your program. It's a bit cheesy perhaps, but if you get thrown the question, you gotta kind of answer it, and at the same time be honest. Okay. Wow, how time flies.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next year.
Bye-bye now.